Bowing that the sound of this bell pervades the universal Dharma realm, bringing luminous white light to the black iron perimeter of hell, removing in an instant the suffering caused by the three evil ways. A mountain of swords is destroyed and all sentient beings enter enlightenment together. Homage to the master teacher, Vairocana Buddha, compassionate Lord of the lotus-born universe, expounding the treasured verses of the sacred golden text contained within precious cases written on jade scrolls. Each dust mote interpenetrates and the universe becomes one. Every realm is united with all other worlds. The truth is contained in the 1,095,048 words of the utmost vehicle's consummate teaching. Homage to the Avatamsaka Sutra expounded by the Buddha. To understand the Buddhas of endless time, just penetrate this phrase. Everything is created by mind alone. The mantra of shattering hell. Namawata Shijinam Samyak Samota Guchinam. Om Madana Babasi Jiri Jiri Om. Namawata Shijinam Samyak Samota Guchinam. Om Madana Babasi Jiri Jiri Om. Namawata Shijinam Samyak Samota Guchinam. Om Madana Babasi Jiri Jiri Om. thoughts on him that never forget. As thoughts probe that place of no thought, the sixth sense gates will constantly emanate light of purple and gold. Homage to Amitabha Buddha. Amitabha's face, like the full moon, is at the front of the hall of ultimate bliss. Homage to Amitabha Buddha. His jade expressance and his gold form radiate through space. Homage to Amitabha Buddha. If a person call his name for only a moment, they will instantly consummate immeasurable merit. Homage to Amitabha Buddha. Along with all sentient beings, I bow together to enter the sea of Amitabha's great vows, and to ferry across sentient beings, so that I and others may simultaneously complete the path to Buddhahood. The sublime mantra of the original mind of Amitabha Buddha. Onyatao Maritara Sabama. 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 Onyatao Maritara Sabama.
just sitting, the heart inside this body beats hard. Thoughts move seemingly against the stillness of just sitting, wondering who could possibly say the right thing. In the darkness of historical memory, and in the darkness of the night, now opens into open, spacious, bright skies, sun shining everywhere, illuminating everything which we have cultivated. This is because that is the law of conditionality. Welcome in from the 10 directions. Thank you for joining us for service this morning. If you are sitting, please rise for the chanting of Short Gable. Please join us now for the three refuges in English. We say together, I go for refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the three jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly, so that understanding and compassion will flower, and I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. Please turn now to the Heart Sutra. Dhamma Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. The Bodhisattva of great compassion, from the deep practice of Prajna Paramita, perceived the emptiness of all five skandhas and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, nor extinction of ignorance, no old age and death, nor extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna paramita. Therefore the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future, through faith in prajna paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the prajna paramita is the great Dharani, the radiant fearless mantram, the utmost supreme mantram, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the prajna paramita. Gate, gate, para gate, para samgate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, para gate, para samgate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, para gate, para samgate, bodhisattva. Dhamma prajna paramita hridaya sutra. Well, again, good morning. I have a Dharma verse for you this morning. This nature is neither good nor bad. We cannot control it, but we can direct, master, and shape it. Our nature is directed by karma. Cultivation is the direction of karma. Karma is action. Action is intention realized. Awareness is intentional consciousness. And so intentional consciousness suffuses all actions, large or small, significant or insignificant, with an ineffable ethical power and meaning. I invite you to begin today simply by asking yourself one question. What is the condition of my mind right now? In fact, you can stop periodically throughout any day or when you arise in the morning and ask yourself this question, kind of checking in for a minute. This is internal practice, internal contemplation. What is the condition of my mind right now? Because we have a sense of how the mind feels, as it were. Maybe it feels a little tight, because the rest of the body may also feel that way. Maybe it's narrow. Maybe it's depressed. It's low. Maybe it's open, spacious. Don't try to figure out why it is the way that it is. Just know its condition and note it. And just watch that condition. Eventually, the more that you watch, the more you understand what causes it to be there. Now, there's quite a lot going on, to say the least. We have COVID-19. We have riots, violence even in our own city, not far from this very doorstep. Military violence, climate change. And with everything going on, our minds can get a little tight. They get a little narrow. And so I was surveying some prevailing attitudes and words, because we're always called upon to have to say something about what's going on, right? We always have to try and say the right thing, figure out what the best thing is to say. Words can hurt a lot. Sometimes they don't help enough. So just surveying some of the prevailing things that I've seen says police need to act without fear of prosecution or they can't do their jobs. Or I've seen police racial brutality is nothing new. We've seen outrage, condemnation, judgments about the senselessness of actions. It's murder. Or I've seen we shouldn't have to educate you to be an ally. Or we don't know how to be allies because we can't understand your experience. I feel stuck, like I can't talk, like I don't have the right opinion, like I'm not allowed to talk. I'm not the right person to talk. I'll be blamed if I do. I'll be blamed if I don't. And you don't get enough space to talk, to be heard, to be seen, to be counted among what or who is real, to be counted among what matters. And who decided all of this anyway? And so I have a second question. So the first question was, what is the condition of my mind right now? That's internal practice. Looking outward, the second question, so our external practice, as it were, what are you offering? So in our sharing of merit ceremony that we have been doing, there's a line that says, make an offering, be an offering. So at any time, what is it that you are offering? You know, sometimes we make offerings on the altar. We put water, sometimes there's food. Why do we do that? Buddha statues don't get hungry. They don't get thirsty. What is the purpose of that offering? It is to practice a mind which makes offerings to become an offering. And so in every moment of our practice, we get to have another moment where we get to try and cultivate this attitude of making an offering. And what kind of offerings are we trying to make? We'll get to that in a little bit. And so I actually want to read something to you. So today might take a little longer than normal. Because I think what we need to do in a lot of cases is take a step back, because there's a lot of cases when we contemplate this question of what am I making as an offering? We need to step back and look at the whole field that we're cultivating, as it were. Because what's happening right now sometimes feels like a rehearsal, doesn't it? You check into your favorite news articles. They're always talking about property damage instead of people. Anytime gun violence happens, we say a lot of the same stuff. It feels like we're rehearsing, for a show that just keeps happening. We never seem to get beyond the rehearsal. And so, as an attempt to take a step back, I thought of this song, actually, oddly enough. It popped into my head. It's an old Bob Dylan song that I want to read the whole thing because I think it matters today. Maybe you've heard it. It's kind of a lesser known song that wasn't on one of his regular albums. It's called Who Killed Davy Moore? He was at one time a boxer, an African-American boxer. And he was well known at the time. And so the constant refrain, which I'm not going to read every time just to save time, it says, who killed Davy Moore? Why and what's the reason for? And so what I'm going to read is all of the verses. And the first one says, not I, says the referee. Don't point your finger at me. I could have stopped it in the 8th and maybe kept him from his fate. But the crowd would have booed, I'm sure, at not getting their money's worth. It's too bad he had to go, but there was a pressure on me too, you know. It wasn't me that made him fall. No, you can't blame me at all. Not us, says the angry crowd, whose screams filled the arena loud. It's too bad he died that night, but we just like to see a fight. We didn't mean for him to meet his death. We just meant to see some sweat. There ain't nothing wrong in that. It wasn't us that made him fall. No, you can't blame us at all. Not me, says his manager, puffing on a big cigar. It's hard to say, it's hard to tell. I always thought that he was well. It's too bad for his wife and kids he's dead. But if he was sick, he should have said, "It wasn't me that made him fall. No, you can't blame me at all." "Not me," says the gambling man, with his ticket stub still in his hand. "It wasn't me that knocked him down. My hands never touched him none. I didn't commit no ugly sin. Anyway, I put money on him to win. It wasn't me that made him fall. No, you can't blame me at all." "Not me," says the boxing writer, pounding print on his old typewriter, saying, "Boxing ain't to blame. There's just as much danger in a football game. Saying fist fighting is here to stay. It's just the old American way. It wasn't me that made him fall. No, you can't blame me at all." "Not me," says the man whose fists laid him low in a cloud of mist, who came here from Cuba's door where boxing ain't allowed no more. I hit him, yes, it's true. But that's what I am paid to do. Don't say murder, don't say kill. It was destiny, it was God's will. Who killed Davy Moore? Why and what's the reason for? Who killed George Floyd? Who killed Eric Garner? Why and what's the reason for? And so the reason that this came to mind is that there's a way in which this song steps back and takes a look at what everyone is offering in this particular situation. And most of the time, what it is no, you can't blame me at all. I didn't do these things. I'm not responsible for this. The Buddhist understanding, of karma, so this kind of two things happened for me on Friday while I was contemplating all of the things that are going on, is this song came to me, and then I also thought of something else. I began to think about karma. And karma is just kind of an accumulation of undisciplined habits over time. Karma is action. It is what we choose to do. It is our intentions. And I started to think about karma, and I remembered something I read several years ago from Bhikkhu Chintita, who's a Western monk in the Theravada tradition. He ordained around the age of 50. And he lives in the southwestern United States, and he wrote an autobiography. And he had this brilliant metaphor for understanding how karma works, because we get kind of tied up in knots about how we understand karma. And it seemed applicable both in the context of this song and our current situations. So what he had to say was that karma is like working in an office. Not what you expected, right? So we get this job called being human. And it's like sitting down to your new desk in the office. And right away, here's a stack of paperwork. You need to process this stuff coming in from the outside. And so you're diligently signing off on things, putting them over in the done basket. Oh, I don't know what to do with these. I'll put these over here. I'll deal with those later. And then the stuff keeps streaming in and you keep taking care of it. But he says, somebody comes along, says, I see you're new here and you've got this new job. Well, somebody else had this job before you. And let me show you this other room. And so you walk over to this other room and you realize they open the door. Oh my gosh, it's full of boxes of unprocessed paperwork. What am I going to do with all this stuff? You could shut the door and you could say, well, I didn't make that stuff. That's not mine. Oh well, just put it in storage, maybe. Or maybe someone else will take care of that. And so this metaphor speaks to both personal and collective karma, because it goes both ways. And so this other room is basically everything that we have received up to this point, everything that our ancestors have cultivated, everything that we have unknowingly cultivated before we started maybe trying to pay more attention to what it is that we're cultivating or offering, as it were. When we start to pay attention and shine the light of awareness on our own mind, we realize, oh, maybe there's a lot of pre-existing attitudes and habits. I have received a great deal of benefit from the suffering of others. I didn't do all of those things personally. I didn't create those attitudes. I didn't create those lines in the towns and cities. Here I am just processing my own paperwork. But Buddhist practice, spiritual practice, and the Buddhist view of karma begins by taking responsibility for what arises in this body-mind. And sometimes with what arises, we get stuck because we want to latch on to guilt or remorse. And these things are actually not helpful to our practice. That is not the purpose of reflection. It is not the purpose of trying to understand and take responsibility for everything that has happened up to now, whether you personally did it or not. But here it is, your human job. And we have to ask ourselves, will we take responsibility for doing this job? Or will we just reflect, be outraged, or be complacent, close the door? Yell, scream, be quiet. There's all of these different options. I'm not here to tell you how to take responsibility or what exactly that looks like. I have a suggestion today. But this human job is a little bit of an experiment, and you have to play with it a little bit. And you have to figure it out. Taking responsibility means trying to figure it out. Because if we just take whatever arises in this body and mind and we just latch onto it, that's where we create this sense of self, this sense of identity, and then you get stuck and the mind becomes narrow. And you feel like you're rehearsing in a play. What if we were to offer something different? What is it that we are offering? What can we offer instead? So the cultivation and direction of karma, the mastering of karma, begins with your choice and intention to do so. And the choice and intention to do so is the very act of taking responsibility for what it is. We don't have to be victims of our own thought processes or emotions. We can reflect honestly on what is the condition of this mind, what's in it. not so that we can figure out how bad we are, not so we can feel guilt. We aim to look honestly and reflect with clarity so that we can let go into spaciousness, so that that is what we can offer to others. We can decide to take a different direction. And the Buddha has offered one of these directions. Technically, it's four. It's something called the Brahma Viharas. Sometimes it's translated as the divine abodes. I often like to refer to them as the four boundless minds, because it is an offering that we can develop. It is a way of cultivating our practice so that while we're sitting on the cushion or while we're at the temple with our friends and Sangha members, when we are able to do that, we practice cultivating these boundless minds. So that would be loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. In particular, I'm just going to focus on loving kindness, or benevolence, or kindness is actually a better translation technically, and compassion today. And the reason that they are called boundless is because compassion and kindness, by their very nature, are open and only function with open spaciousness. When we have compassion, it doesn't mean that I'm here to suffer with you. Instead, what we can offer is the spaciousness of compassion to hold the suffering of oneself and others without falling apart, without breaking down. So we need to offer the spaciousness of compassion to others in order to be able to hold it. If we are not ourselves spacious, we do not have spaciousness and openness to offer. And oddly enough, the Buddha does not actually define compassion in any of the discourses. He only gets at it by way of simile. And the real crux of compassion, or let's start actually, loving kindness is actually talked about more often in the discourses because it subsumes compassion. So universal kindness and benevolence is inclusive of compassion. And so cultivating them has a kind of cumulative effect. We don't do them separately necessarily, but you can actively cultivate one and then the other sequentially, just so that you get that sense. And so loving kindness or benevolence is the wish for others to be happy. Compassion, on the other hand, is the wish, is born out of the wish for oneself and others to be free from affliction and suffering. So you can see how one is inclusive of the other, but they are actually different. And I'm going to read a little bit from Bhikkhu Manalayo's text, Compassion and Emptiness in Early Buddhist Meditation, because I think he has a really great simile for this. So he says, in actual meditation practice, there is a similar combination of inward fusion of the mind and concentration that results in the outward radiation of each of the Brahma Viharas. The more the mind is fused in deep concentration, the more powerful and pervasive the radiation of any Brahma Vihara becomes. And so the original practice of the development and cultivation of compassion and loving kindness is considered to be a radiation practice. One actually suffuses or infuses the mind and body with the felt sense of compassion and then radiates that outwards. It is not a highly verbal and mental task. This comes later from commentarial traditions. And so he continues on. Regarding the distinct quality of each divine abode in the context of a sun simile, metta would be like the sun, is loving kindness, would be like the sun at midday in a cloudless sky, illuminating everything equally and providing warmth in all directions. Just as the sun shines on what is high and low, clean and dirty, so metta shines on all without making distinctions. The sun keeps shining independently of how its rays are received. It does not shine more if people move out into the open to be warmed by its rays, nor does it shine less because people move back indoors. Similarly, metta does not depend on reciprocation. Its rays of kindness shine on others out of an inner strength that pervades all bodily activities, words, and thoughts without expecting a return. From the center of one's heart, metta shines in rays on anyone encountered, just as the sun shines in all directions from its position in the midst of the sky. Compassion, in turn, would be like the sun just before sunset. Darkness is close, almost palpably close. Yet the sun keeps shining. In fact, it shines all the more brilliantly, beautifully coloring the sky at sunset. Similarly, when being face to face with suffering and affliction, the mental attitude of compassion shines even more brilliantly, undeterred by all the darkness found in the world. At sunset, the sun appears as if it were moving downwards. So too, compassion is willing to reach out to those in a less fortunate position. So with these images, I know it's getting late, but I'd also like to do a guided meditation so that you can learn this practice of radiation and you can refer back to it as needed. And so today's talk really just ends with remembering these two questions of what is the condition of my mind right now? And what am I offering? Please prepare for meditation, which will be a guided meditation. If you do not have much experience with meditation, please begin by just finding a good, stable, comfortable posture for yourself to sit in, whether it's a chair or on a mat and cushion or on the floor. Bring your awareness gently to your breathing. This is the basic foundation of any meditation practice. Focus on nothing but the breath, as if it were the most interesting thing you could possibly imagine to pay attention to. And it's all there is. If you need help calming your thoughts, you can count the outgoing breath like this. You can just count from 5 down to 0. And when you get to 0, you go back to 5, and so on. So just sit focusing on your breath. Let the mind relax, let the body relax, be open and spacious, like the sky, the body solid as a mountain. As thoughts begin to settle, spaciousness may start to arise. The tightness of the mind may subside. You should notice the difference. You can rejoice in that difference. And as the mind and body settle, you can turn in to the practice and cultivation of compassion. Perhaps you want to begin with an image or even a phrase. Keep it short. You don't want to have a lot of mental proliferation. You want to have an image. Even yesterday, just thinking of my own children having grown up, I was walking through a store and saw little baby shoes, and it arouses this kind of softness and warmth in the center of my chest. Maybe you think of animals. And the mental and verbal wish that you and others be free from afflictions and suffering. Really cultivate that felt mental and bodily sense. Compassion, universal kindness is a bodily, visceral experience. Experiment to see what arouses that sense for you. And this practice is recommended because it doesn't require high levels of concentration like other practices do, and in fact can actually deepen and lead to very deep concentration, which provides spaciousness, and spaciousness is the liberation of the mind from its own itinerant thinking process. So just stay with that felt sense. Arouse the mind and body of compassion. Let it infuse the mind like sunlight that touches everything in its path, enveloping it completely. And from the Buddha's own words in the discourse, one dwells having pervaded one direction with a mind imbued with metta or compassion. And in the same way, the second, third, and fourth directions, the four intermediate directions above and below, completely and everywhere. And there are two distinctions between a mind that has become great and a mind that has become boundless. The mind that has become great can hold many things around it, maybe stretching through the room or just beyond. And a boundless mind can radiate compassion in all the directions, removing all boundaries. We have to practice and cultivate this to know it fully and to stretch beyond those boundaries. And the Buddha again says, being without mental shackles, resentment, ill will, or contention, with a mind imbued with compassion and universal kindness that is supremely vast and great, boundless and well developed, one dwells having pervaded the entire world. Please continue to arouse that felt sense of compassion and universal kindness, letting it fill you up, spreading out from the softness and warmth in the middle of your chest. as you continue to cultivate and infuse the mind and body with compassion and universal kindness, may that be your offering. And what kind of offering will that be? And how will it take shape through the rest of today and from now on? Thank you for spending extra time with us this morning. I apologize for taking up extra of your time. And thank you for your sincere efforts and practice. And briefly, as this would normally be our announcements portion of the service, I would like to read just a little bit from the sharing of merit ceremony, as we do kind of a short version now, so that we can acknowledge and recognize also the current pandemic that is still occurring amidst everything else. So inequality among all beings, with open-hearted compassion for those who are facing any mental or physical challenges, who are sick, being treated for sickness, suffering isolation and loneliness, or close to death. We now hold it all in our hearts and minds. And this week, for the number of cases of COVID-19 in Kent County, there are 3,591 cases and 80 deaths. In Michigan, 56,884 cases, 5,463 deaths. And in the United States, 1,737,950 cases and 102,785 deaths. And worldwide, 5,817,385 cases and 362,705 deaths. And all those not yet reported. And I'm going to read the actual dedication of merit. So by the virtue collected and the grace received through our Dharma activities of body, speech, and mind, we now dedicate this great field of merit for the transformation of suffering into the causes of awakening the hearts of all sentient beings. In this great field of merit is like a field of plants. We literally get the seeds that we sow. We plant all broccoli, we get broccoli. And this great field of merit we call universal mind. If we plant compassion and kindness, we get compassion and kindness. So with that, please join us for our final closing gathas this morning. we say together, for all unskillful action ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thoughts, now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddha's teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passion, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. Thank you again for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If anyone has any comments or questions today before we end the live stream? Hi, Jake. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. All right.
I see no questions.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.